Python and Java are great examples of interpreted programming languages. The code is read as it's loaded, as you or I would read it. This means that the code can be quickly modified and changed, even locally by the user to some degree. But with this advantage, you also have the disadvantage of it taking longer to process. In comparison, C is a compiled programming language. That is to say that the code you write isn't more than text that will be translated into something the computer can actually understand. A binary file filled with processor instructions, also known as machine code. I personally like telling people that I've created a binary file, or tell them to run the binary file as it is more general. You could also tell people to run the executable or .exe file on Windows. Right, so what do I mean by translator? It's called a compiler, as it compiles the simple, understandable text we wrote and, well, compiles it into a neat computer-understood file. Interpreters, on the other hand, are what are used to interpret interpretable programming languages, such as Python. So, where do we get a compiler? Well, you have many different options. You can get GCC, Xcode, MSVCR. I'll be using GCC, as it is the one I'm most familiar with, as well as being both cross-platform and open source. I'll be using it on GNU Linux, as it usually comes pre-installed, which is pretty cool. I'll skip the installation, as it's not what I'm here for. And if you can't figure out how to actually get the compilers installed, maybe you're not ready to be programming in C. A big part of computer programming is being able to solve problems, so getting your workspace set up will be the first of many you'll encounter. Plus, that means you can use whichever compiler that's best suited for you. Now, down to coding. We could write it in Notepad, but that won't make our life very easy. We need a more advanced text editor. You have many different choices here. You got Atom or Sublime, maybe Nano or Vim, Notepad++. The choice, as always, is yours, and it will change nothing. A pure text editor doesn't have much functionality when it comes to compiling your code out of the box. If it did, it would be closer to an IDE, an integrated development environment, such as Visual Studio and Eclipse. You see, our text editor is just that, a program to edit text. It'll add colors and padding to our code. Maybe it allows us to have multiple files open or autocomplete. Do some research and pick the one you like. Alright, now that we have everything we need, we can start writing our very first C program. Usually the first program someone would write in a new programming language is Hello World, so all it needs to do is print Hello World when executed. I'll create a new file here called main.c. Here's the code we need to write to get it working. I'll explain every line in a second. First, let's compile the file and see if everything's working. GCC is usually used in the terminal, so I first need to open up the terminal and navigate my way to my working directory. To compile a file, I simply write GCC, the name of the file, -o, and then the output where I want to export basically the file. It's kind of like rendering a video. When we run our program, we see Hello World. Huzzah! So, what's really going on? Well, C, like most languages, is read from top to bottom, one line at a time, though it can jump around the place if prompted. But before anything, we need to start with our preprocessor directives. Include stdio.h is a preprocessor directive. We know this because it has a little pound at the start. This piece of code is only there for the compiler. Here it tells it that we would like to include a file called stdio.h. This file includes standard input-output functionality, filled with helpful methods to read and write from and to the terminal. This is what gives us the ability to print f. Next we have our main function, defined as such. You'll notice these curly brackets here. They define the start and end of the main block. The program starts after the first curly bracket and ends right before the last one. This will be used in various different parts of C. Why int main? This is a bit harder to explain this early on. The int before the main tells you that this function will return an integer value. Here, for instance, we return 0. This means that the program will exit without an error, as it reached this point and managed to return 0. If we wanted to, we could return any integer number we want. This will be good for error testing later on. Once a function returns something, it ends and no longer continues down the line. Once our main function returns, the program is terminated, and returns the code of which was returned. After creating this video, I've noticed that I might be more interested in experimenting with concepts that are newer to me over explaining the basics. I think others have done that better than me. Nonetheless, I hope to see you next time. This video will now return 0.